Hi, I'm Chris Roselli.
And I'm Tina Thatch, and welcome to Western Window, a show made for you by students at Western Washington University.
In today's episode of Western Window, we present Office Hours. In this show, our host, Dan Purdy, leads a discussion that explores a topic that colleges and universities everywhere continually revisit: the nature and value of a liberal arts education.
The discussion between a business leader and leaders on Western's campus centers on the widening skills gap in labor and employment, and how our educational systems can help address it and better prepare our students for the new demands of a 21st century workforce.
So stay with us as we explore our world through Western Window and Office Hours.
Welcome to Western's Office Hours, where we explore important topics in our world and how Western is engaging with them. I'm your host, Dan Purdy, Director of the Front Door to Discovery here at Western Washington University. I also teach marketing, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the College of Business and Economics. We're broadcasting from the Western Washington University Special Collections Room, a unit of Heritage Resources. The Heritage Resources provides for responsible stewardship of unique and archival resources in support of teaching, learning, and research. The Center for Pacific Northwest Studies, Special Collections, and University Archives work together to document the culture and history of Western, the local community, and the Pacific Northwest region. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you work in an organization, whether it's a company, a nonprofit, or a government agency, you may have heard something about the topic we're going to discuss today: the value of the liberal arts in higher education. Though, you may not have heard it put quite that way. Many times it's described as the skills gap. Overall, there's confusion about what the liberal arts are, if they're important, and if so, why. This problem might seem irrelevant outside of higher education, but recent reports are that about 52% of U.S. businesses say they can't find skilled workers, even though there are still millions of people unemployed. It's estimated that the U.S. government spends about $1.5 trillion, that's with a T, dollars on human capital development each year. So clearly, this discussion is important. With all that treasure being spent and millions of jobs going unfilled, questions about the liberal arts have never been more important. Many are asking whether it's a solution, or maybe whether it's part of the problem. With us here to discuss this important topic are three talented guests with very different backgrounds. Dr. Brent Carbajal is Provost of Western, basically its Chief Academic Officer. And prior to becoming Provost, he was Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Western. And prior to that, he was a professor and taught in the Modern and Classical Languages Department, done a lot of research in the area of Latin American and Hispanic American literature and culture. Ms. Jane Carton is President and Director of Saturna Capital. She graduated from Western with an MBA and an undergraduate degree in computer science and business. Currently, she oversees Saturna's daily operations, including marketing, information technology, and its philanthropic activities. And Dr. Ed Love is Professor of Marketing and Chair of our Finance and Marketing Department at Western. His research interests include choice modeling, decision theory, marketing strategy, and innovation. And before he became a professor, he was an entrepreneur and a consultant for about 10 years, doing all kinds of different interesting things. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time to discuss this really important topic today. So, Dr. Carbajal, let's start with you and explore this whole idea of what the liberal arts are. In my experience, people use words, but they don't often think about what they really, really mean. So perhaps you could start us off with, what does liberal arts mean to you?
I think, to me, the liberal arts, first and foremost, are how we learn, not necessarily what we learn. It fosters the habits of mind and the empathy that produce engaged citizens. Mm-hmm. The liberal arts and sciences foster lifelong learning. And when I said earlier that it's the how and not the what, it is really something that teaches us how to continue to learn, how to perhaps be able to think differently, even maybe beyond the area of our disciplinary expertise.
So it's not an end point per se, it's a process. right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So Jane, you work in the executive world every day, come from a liberal arts background at Western, having graduated from Fairhaven, and yet you work in a pretty highly technical field. What does liberal arts mean to you?
I think a lot of the same things in terms of, creative thinking as well as critical thinking and being an engaged member of the community. I think liberal arts, when applied properly, give you the foundation that you need to look at something in a manner that allows you to be curious and then act on that curiosity in terms of coming up with a solution.
Ed, you work in the business field and marketing, and there are quite a few expectations out there from marketing employers about what students are graduating with. What do you think about the liberal arts? What does it mean to you?
Well, when I think about the liberal arts, I think about it as an exploration of the human condition. I think about it as where we really get our sense of purpose, and I think that we get an understanding of what motivates us socially, what motivates us culturally, how society moves, and all of these things are very important for us to understand as business leaders. So it's a tremendously important part of our education.
Those are some pretty heady descriptions and pretty big stuff there. Brent, back to you. We're a public university. What do you say to folks who say studying the human condition, sort of this bigger thing that Jane talked about, maybe that's beyond the scope of what an education should be? Shouldn't it really prepare students for a career?
I think the liberal arts and sciences prepare students for just about any career. And again, the liberal arts and sciences constitute that base, that foundation upon which disciplinary expertise and knowledge is really built. And that the contention that the liberal arts would be something separate and distinct from a major is just something that I personally just can't accept. I think it's part of every major that we produce, from STEM areas to anything on campus. So I don't see it as something that you can pull apart.
So it's not something that's separate and distinct from career preparation. It's part of career preparation, right?
Yeah, there's a difference between maybe the applied skills or the specific area that an individual needs to study to go toward a specific career. Mm-hmm. But the liberal arts and sciences prepare the individual to continue to learn in the future, to be the productive and engaged citizen, culturally aware and caring. So it's all part of an overall education, in my opinion.
So Ed, you work in one of those pretty technical fields. People have certain expectations of a marketing student when they graduate. Mm-hmm. How does what Brent described sort of fit into the world that you live in?
Well, I think that what we're looking at is sort of an instrumental perspective on the liberal arts, and that's fine. I think that's a very important case that we can make for the liberal arts.
So it's a means to an end, in other words, right?
Yeah. I teach a course on innovation, and in that course, as I talk to people about how to be more innovative, one touchstone I have is some of the ideas that Tim Brown has introduced at IDEO. And he says that when they look for people, they look for what he calls T-shaped people. T-shaped people are people who are very deep in one area, but they also have a lot of different interests. And what that does is it allows them to be a vector for innovation. It allows them to share ideas from their discipline of expertise more effectively with people in other disciplines, and to take ideas from other disciplines and bring them back into their own. That's where innovation comes from, when we can relate seemingly unrelated ideas.
That's really interesting.
As we expose our students to the liberal arts, we actually make them much more innovative in some of the more traditional business fields that we might think about.
Much more T-shaped.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that when I look back on my career and the things that have made me stand out and be a little more successful or effective, it's really been where I've been able to leverage my unusual background, my early focus on the liberal arts and some of the other things that I've done internationally.
Right. Excellent. So Jane, you did a couple of technical degrees here at Western, computer science, business, and you work in a highly technical field today. And here we're talking about having a broad range of things. With your experiences, how do you see that helping people?
Well, I did do a couple of fairly technical degrees here. However, I did them through Fairhaven College, which had a liberal arts core curriculum to it that was the base for everything else that I learned and did. So I think that for me, and I think for a lot of people, if you can marry the two in a way that allows you to take this creative, critical thinking and apply it to an actual task, then you really become empowered and realize, okay, I can use this skill set any way I want.
Right.
And it really just opens up all kinds of opportunities.
Right. Well, that's really interesting because I think I like Ed. I teach innovation a little bit too, and one of the things we talk a lot about is how you can take ideas from one discipline, one area, and apply it in a different area. It's interesting how many folks are working on the same problem from very different perspectives, and if they shared that, and of course we call that interdisciplinary in terms of having people, but when you think about the liberal arts, it's essentially interdisciplinary. That's what you're doing, is you're teaching people how to work across lines. So Ed, let's consider maybe a different argument. Recently, a Boston U economist named James Besson wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review where he essentially said, hey, the skills gap is real and we need to pay attention to it. And the argument he made is that technology is moving so fast that as soon as schools graduate people, their skills are essentially outdated. They have to go learn new stuff. And he used the example of graphic designers, how they graduate and all they really know is print, and they have to go learn how to do mobile or web or other things. And if you learn Flash technology one year, the next year it's out of vogue and now it's HTML5. So what implications does that have for the liberal arts? This idea that our graduates are out of date immediately in terms of skills, and what might the liberal arts have to say about that?
Oh, I think that skills gap is very real, and I see it in marketing as strongly as in any field. We have students who graduate, and the field of marketing is moving very strongly in the area of analytics. In terms of digital marketing, we have we see firms moving way far ahead of where we are in terms of the technology that we're teaching. And so on the one hand, we have to make sure that we are preparing people for that context. And we can do that by purely teaching them the skills. But we can also prepare them for that by giving them a better framework for learning. And we want students, Western students, to be able to walk into any environment and be able to say, it's okay, I've got this. I just need a little bit of time to learn the context that I'm working in and figure out how I can take my ability to synthesize information and apply it in this particular instance. So I think that both of those approaches are appropriate. We certainly need to make sure that our disciplines are relevant,
right.
But at the same time, we need our students themselves to feel confident as they go out there that they're going to be able to pick up whatever they need.
We talk about being in a situation right now where we can't anticipate what the careers or jobs might be even 5, 10, 20 years down the road. We probably have said that for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
That's why the liberal arts and sciences provide that solid grounding and teach how to learn, not necessarily what, so that someone who does have, again, the skills, the disciplinary expertise in an area might be able to adapt and to think differently. And thinking differently doesn't just happen. There has to be a terrain fertile for that. So I think now is a time for the liberal arts and sciences, just like it has been a time for the liberal arts and sciences for many, 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 many years.
Right.
And that is, we cannot see the future.
And liberal arts is a process, not a thing, so it changes constantly too. It's not as if
I think so.
The liberal arts is some antiquated thing. It's constantly being updated with new information. So let's stay with you, Brent. You've probably had this conversation with more students than you'd like to think of as an advisor over the years, but let's say some student walks in and sits down and says, well, I don't really like the liberal arts because it forces me to take classes in areas that I'm really not interested in, and I can't focus my energies on where I am interested in. How do you guide that student?
First, I would gently and as politely as possible try to point out that statement reflects a certain conflation of general education requirements and major requirements, and that really the liberal arts and sciences is the whole education, and that it does entail as a student understanding and taking that approach and not dividing things up.
Right.
Maybe making some choices about general education requirements depending on the certain general education category that would align well with a major, but that would be almost my, and remembering of course that any academic advising that I did was in languages and Spanish, so already in the humanities, but that would be my emphasis, would be to understand that this is an education that's taking place and that is forming, and that certainly as a student you have the ability to shape that.
Right.
But to not confuse, to not mistake required courses or even the choices within them with the liberal arts and sciences education that eventually you will come out with. Then I would typically make some comments about the fact that it is hard to see the benefit of some things right away. Speaking for myself, I think it probably took me 10 or 15 years after graduation before I was really able to put into perspective what some of the things that I had taken as an undergraduate had done for me in graduate school, in teaching, or even in just professional endeavors generally.
If they've already made that decision and they've decided that they're going to pursue that as their undergraduate education, I would commend them on the decision and say that, I think that's a very valid choice for a lot of people. But that to realize with that, if that's all that they're going to do and they're not going to put any skills-based learning on top of that, they're going to not be quite ready for where they probably think they should be when they graduate. And that it will probably take some additional training or apprentice type time within the workforce before, I think that a lot of people who are drawn to the liberal arts are drawn that way because they are big thinkers and have a lot of wonderful ideas, and I think that can be very devastating for them when they leave college and have their freshly minted degree and are ready to tell everybody all of their ideas and watch them become implemented. And
doesn't really work that way, does it?
Well, I think that, but I think that if they could be more prepared for that in some way and go, okay, well, I'm going to get the best broad education I can and help me learn how to think and learn how to learn, and then I'm going to go and begin to learn.
Right.
Then they wouldn't have these outsized expectations from the start, and hopefully, I think that has the ability to really hinder somebody in their career long term because they get disappointed in the very beginning. I think it's also fine for people to choose a specialty. It's just a different path that they're choosing, and it would be good for them to consider. And I know it's really hard to consider anything 10 years plus out when you're 18 to 22. It seems almost impossible, but they've already chosen a 4-year institution instead of a vocational school. So they've already kind of grappled with that type of a decision, where a vocational school can be an excellent way to get a better lifestyle faster. If you get out of vocational school and are a certified plumber, you will begin to make money more quickly than your friends who have gone to a 4-year institution. Then, once you're done with your 4-year institution, you have to decide, am I going to become a doctor and go to school more? And it's just, it's a longer path than people are realizing in terms of education, but it does have, it should have rewards on the other side. And I think it does, and I think it does not only in being professionally rewarded and having a better career, but being personally rewarded, being really seeing the value of your community and being a citizen in your community, understanding where you fit in the world and the difference that you can make, and it can really lead to an honestly better life.
Bill Gates and Paul Allen and Mark Zuckerberg all spent several years at Harvard. So you're going to get a lot of liberal arts education in the couple of years that they're there.
Well, you look at Steve Jobs, right? I mean, he talks about, he said that, the idea for desktop publishing, that emerged from a calligraphy class that he dropped in on
at Reed College.
Reed,
That he audited, literally audited,
And a lot of the ideas that he had for computer innovations came from when he was traveling and exposing himself to new ideas. So it's absolutely essential.
Well, I think there's a notion that you can only get a liberal arts education within a university. But a liberal arts education is available for free in libraries and traveling around the world. What we sometimes maybe help is giving direction to folks who may not know what to look into, may not know what to study, and do those sort of things. So, so Jane, you talked earlier about this idea of interconnectedness, right? As a business professional, especially in the world of investing, and you guys are famous for Islamic investing, what's the nature of this complexity and this connectedness? Why is that so important?
I think, basically, connectedness is something that has always been important, well before the internet made it something that people talked about a lot, and in those terms. The world is a lot more flat, and the global influence is a lot more rapid today. And in order to really have a solid understanding of that, you do need the background of the history of how our world became where we see it today. And the connectedness between the past and the present and the future is something that you can't invest without considering.
Right. So Brent, play devil's advocate here a little bit. Can you take the other side of that and perhaps argue that it's not so important? Can you step outside of that?
I think Ed said it very well, that someone whose goal for a liberal arts and sciences education would be to get a job, that might, that person might fail. Or be disappointed, rather. That's probably a better way of putting it. I have a very hard time playing devil's advocate. I can certainly understand. There are personal and professional situations that might dictate certain things for certain individuals that would preclude a broad liberal arts and sciences training early on. But I think when you consider what it is, and again, I'll turn to Ed, who talked about human nature and the human condition, that to say that to have an ability to see that and understand that would be a waste of time. That's difficult for me to advocate. But I would say, yes, that in a lot of cases, if an individual is saying, it absolutely does not matter that, and all I need to do is get a 4-year degree, and I'm going to get a job in anything that I want to do. That's stretching things quite a bit. That's really not quite understanding what
Right.
what is behind what the underpinning of the 4-year education is, and that disciplinary expertise, especially right out of college, what that's going to do. So I guess playing devil's advocate, yeah, I could certainly say that if that's the approach you take, you will likely be disappointed, at least initially.
Yeah, right. So let's wrap up, and maybe just a short tweet, as it were, from each of you. If you had to give a short piece of advice to somebody about their education and career, what would it be? Ed, let's start with you. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I'll vamp here while you think.
A tweet about
Yes.
About your educational experience. The most important thing is to give yourself the opportunity to be exposed to ideas that are very different from your native ideas. Get a lot of different context,
Right.
and then allow yourself to get deep into what you're passionate about.
Great.
Don't worry about the job.
It'll take care of itself. Good. Excellent. Brent?
I would agree. Don't worry about the job. Take things seriously. Take your education as seriously as possible. You're in the classroom. You're paying to be there. Everything that's out there is going to benefit you in some way. Right away, maybe 5, 10, 20 years down the road. So I would try to convey my personal experience, being that it's a lifelong realization. You realize the benefit from your 4-year undergraduate degree or education all throughout your life. There's just no doubt about that in my mind. That's much longer than a tweet.
That's okay. Thank you. Jane?
I would say it's sort of the same thing as these gentlemen, where your education is what you make of it, and you can be at any school, from the very top ranked school to the very bottom ranked school, and essentially give yourself the same education, because you will have professors that will help guide you if you're interested, and you should take that responsibility seriously, because it's really up to you how far you go with your education.
So that's it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such an important topic, and one that we obviously barely scratch the surface of. But I thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us for Western's Office Hours. Until next time, we'll see you.
That wraps up this segment of Office Hours and this episode of Western Window.
Be sure to tune in next time as we explore the world at and around Western Washington University.